Hi there, and thank you so much for checking out this video. So today I wanted to make something out of all of the craft supplies that I already have. I have quite an extensive stash, so I wanted to just use up some stuff that I already have and not go out and buy more things for a new project. So I had a look around and I have loads and loads of embroidery hoops. So I decided to use them to make some wall hangings. So scrolling through Pinterest, the ever helpful Pinterest, I found lots of interesting different types of wall hanging. So I'm going to make 3 different ones out of all of my array of things that I have to hand. So one of them is going to be sort of like a macrame style thing. I have this really cool wool that I bought ages ago that I have never used and I really want to try it out on something. So it's going to be macrame style but not proper macrame because there's no knots involved. It's just going to be sort of crossed over threads. It's going to be cool. Another one is going to be using some twine wrapped around the hoop. I've seen lots of ones online used to display dried flowers. So you just stick the flowers in between the twine and they're sort of suspended in the hoop and it looks really cool. I don't have any dried flowers though, so I'm going to get creative and try something else. Similar, but not quite the same. And then another one I'm going to do is going to be kind of based on a dream catcher, but it's definitely not a dream catcher. I've seen people do them online before, usually for like boho weddings, but I like that kind of thing, so why should it just be reserved for a wedding? So it's kind of like using a doily in the centre and then having lots of streamers coming down, in the shape of a dream catcher, but not actually a dream catcher at all. So with vague plans in mind, let us begin. So I started off by clearing away my many potential materials and choosing a medium-sized hoop. I took the middle ring out to work on and wasn't sure if I would put the outer ring back on or not and just left it to one side for now. I started with the grey wool and it took me a stupidly long time to work out that the end of the wool was tucked inside the ball. But when I finally figured that out, I kind of had a picture in my head of what I wanted to create, but I hadn't experimented, so I was really just making this up as I went along. I wanted long strands of wool that I could double up and attach to the ring. I wasn't sure how many I needed, so I started off cutting 6. I doubled up my strands and attached it to the ring with a lark's head knot. It's super easy. I put the looped part of the thread under the ring, then pass the 2 tails up through the loop and then just pull it tight around the ring. I repeated this 5 times and decided that was enough as the wool is really chunky. I bunched up the strands close together on the ring and then repeated the same thing with the yellow wool. I wanted the strands to go across each other diagonally, so I left a bit of a gap between the grey and the yellow wool. Once they were all attached, I set about securing the wool to the opposite side of the ring, starting off with the grey first. I had to try this a few times to get what I wanted, but I finally decided to pass the wool under the ring, loop it back up, tie a knot, and then pull it tight with the tail of the wool underneath. It's really hard to describe, but hopefully the video will just show you how I did that. So I did that with all 10 of the grey strands, and it's quite important not to cross any of them over as this particular design relies on them being flat and neat. Once that was done for the grey, I then needed to weave the yellow through the grey before securing them to the ring as well. I think there's a few different designs that could be tried with this, but the one I went for was quite simple. I decided to weave all the yellow ones first before attaching them to the other side of the ring. The first yellow strand went under the first grey strand. The second yellow strand went under 2 of the grey strands. The third strand went under the first 3 grey strands, and so on until all the strands are woven except the last one, which goes behind all of the grey strands. I shuffled everything around a bit to get it neat and then attached the yellow threads to the ring the same way as I did the grey. I ended up moving them around and shuffling them up a bit again because I wanted the two colours of the fringe at the bottom to touch, but I wanted a bit of a gap at the top. Luckily everything slides really easily on the ring to allow for that. I did decide to put the outer ring back on to maintain that embroidery hoop look. Next, I cut the fringe on diagonals to form a point in the middle, and no, I did not measure it because that's the kind of crazy risk taker I am, baby. Luckily, I managed to get it pretty even. I knew I wanted to decorate the fringe with something, and I had originally thought wooden beads, but didn't really like how they looked when I placed them on top, and I wasn't sure if they would fit on because the wool was really chunky and the holes were quite small. I also had these wooden stars, which I instantly loved when I placed them on top, but I was a little bit worried about gluing them on. There wasn't really any other way of attaching them, so I just went for it anyway. I've got myself a new glue gun because I was using a mini one for ages and then always complaining about how the glue ran out so quickly. And then one day I was like, wait a minute, I could just buy a big one. So I did. And with my shiny new and gloriously unsticky glue gun, I attached my little stars to the fringe. Yeah, I'm pleased with how this one turned out. I think it is what I envisaged it. I think with the crossover it doesn't lie as flat as maybe I wanted it to because it's very chunky wool, so it would probably look better with actual macrame twine. Probably would be a bit better, but I do think it came out really well, and I think it's got quite a modern vibe. I think the stars add a little something extra. They're quite cute, and maybe it would be cute for like a nursery or a child's room or something. It's sweet. But who am I kidding? I would like this in my room too. But yes, pleased with how it turned out. So seeing as I have my glue gun already out, I'm going to do my twine idea next. So I'm going to use this big boy. So a lot of the things I've seen on Pinterest and Instagram, you just wrap the twine all the way around many times and stick it to the edge until you have a bar across the middle, and then you just tuck your dried flowers in there as like a really pretty wall hanging. But I don't have any dried flowers. And in the spirit of not buying anything new for this project, I was thinking about altering it slightly so that it could house living flowers. And my idea was to put these little glass vials in there and sort of glue them in to the twine. And then you could fill them up with water and put little flowers in there, and they can live off the water. I don't know how well that will work because it's only a tiny amount of water. You might have to refill it like 3 times a day. But yeah, I'm gonna try it and see what happens. So I started off again by removing the outer hoop, and I decided I wasn't going to put it back on for this one and just use the inner ring. This one literally couldn't be simpler. I just grabbed my twine and glued the end to one side of the hoop, then stretched it across to the other side and glued it there too, before wrapping it back around. One thing to note is that I didn't start in the middle. My first wraparound was a bit lower than the centre because I wanted to leave a larger gap at the top for the flowers to stand up in, and then the twine and the glass bottles can take up the lower half of the circle. I kept it pretty neat by gluing all the strands one beneath each other rather than crossing them over and wrapping it unevenly, although I think that would look pretty good too. Once I had enough twine, I grabbed my little glass bottles and started to play around with where to place them. I had 2 different sizes, so I alternated large and small and decided that gluing them along the little rim edge was probably going to be the best way of doing it. So I put a little dab of glue on the bottle and then pressed the 2 bottom strands of the twine onto the glue and held it there until it dried. I did the same for all the rest of the bottles, then flipped it over and stuck the other side of the twine to the bottles in the same way. And to finish it off, I added some twine to hang it up by and whacked on some of those wooden beads. Now, while I was constructing that, I suddenly thought that although the original designs I'd seen had used dried flowers, I have a ton of paper flowers I could use. They are quite small though, so I decided to make another one in exactly the same way in a smaller hoop, although this time I wasn't so neat with the twine to see how it looked and just wrapped it a bit more unevenly. I added a loop and a bead and then set about choosing my flowers. But do you have a small decorative suitcase full of paper flowers, I hear you ask? Why yes, I do. Gaze upon my suitcase of wonder. These are all leftovers from various projects over the years, and I picked out some neutral and warmer tones because I felt like they looked nicer than the bright ones for this project. When I had decided on the ones I wanted, I just randomly wove the wire stems through the twine. I found it held better if I wove through both layers rather than just the front or the back. And I decided not to glue them in so they can be easily changed if I wanted a different colour scheme. So I think that worked out really well, it was very cute, but the final thing to do now is to see if my larger one works for holding living flowers. So I chose some flowers and then I filled up my little vials with water using a pipette. I placed the flowers down between the 2 sides of the twine. I decided not to weave them in and out because the bottles would just hold them fine where they were. I am very pleased with how this turned out. I think it looks really cool. Yeah, it was kind of a way of getting around not having dried flowers, but I think the little bottles full of water actually look really, really cool. I think the only issue will be cleaning it because the water in the little bottles will go a bit nasty every now and again, so. But I think maybe if you just use cotton buds to clean it out, I think that would work probably quite well. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out. It looks really nice. And yeah, if I do end up getting some dried flowers, I can just have nothing in the pots, just leave them empty and then put all my bits and pieces in there. Yeah, yay. Okay, so onto the final one, and I definitely think I've left the trickiest one to last. I don't think it's going to be super difficult, but yeah, I think it might take a bit longer. So follow me into my stash of doilies. I have collected a lot of doilies over the years. I used to volunteer in a charity shop, and these things would get donated all the time, but just no one would ever buy them, but I couldn't bear to throw them away. They're just so pretty, but I don't really put them around my house or anything, but I just have saved them all for situations such as these. So I had a sift through and I picked out one that I really liked, and it was pretty much the same size as the hoop, but not big enough to be stretched to fit the hoop by itself. So I had to put some sort of netting or some fine fabric behind. I had a scrap bit of sort of lacy netting from a previous project, so I put that in. And then I just pinned on the doily to see how it looked first of all. And then I tacked it with a few stitches. So I just did a couple of simple back stitches every few centimetres around the outside edge of the doily, and then a couple right in the centre as well, just to hold it in place. I used white thread and did really small stitches, so it's really not visible at all. Okay, so on to doing the streamer part of the decoration, and I knew I wanted to do a little bit of macrame in there as well. So I'm making a feather. So I do have a video on my channel about how to make these feathers and also how to make them really neat, because they can be a bit floppy and there are certain ways to stiffen it. So there's a few tips on there and I will link it so you can see that if you're interested, but I'll just give a quick explanation of how to do this, but the other video is more in depth. So I just started off by taking one strand and doubling it up and then attaching it to my embroidery hoop with a lark's head knot. So you just put the loop over the embroidery hoop and then pass the two tails through that loop and it will be attached. I then cut a load of shorter strands. I made sure that they were all the same length as each other, but I really wasn't measuring or anything. I was just going with the flow on this one. So you take two strands, double them up. One of them goes underneath that central piece of twine and one of them stays on top, and you just pass the tails of each piece through the loop of the other one. Again, it's pretty difficult to articulate, but hopefully you can just see from the video how that's working. And again, I wasn't really measuring, but I ended up doing 7 of those. And once they were all attached, I started brushing out the twine. So I like to start off with a comb to start unraveling those threads. And then once they're sort of all loosened up, I then move on to using a pet hairbrush, and that is used because it can get the strands a lot neater because the comb is a lot finer. Okay, and once all of that was brushed out and nice and neat, I did decide it was quite floppy, so I had some spray-on starch that I was just going to add to stiffen it up a little bit, but that is totally not essential, you don't need that at all. It will just help it to keep a little bit neater and hold its shape better. Okay, once that dried out, I was then going to cut my leaf or feather to the shape that I want. And again, going fast and loose with the scissors, not measuring it out at all. If you want it neat, then I would suggest drawing out the shape that you want and cutting a paper template to then use to cut round to make it even. I'm not displeased with that. It's not the neatest thing I've ever seen, but it's also not bad. And this is kind of supposed to be a bit boho, so you know, rustic. Rustic, that's what we're saying. Okay, and once that was done, I then searched through my stash of ribbons to find things in the colour scheme that I wanted. And these are just all leftover bits and pieces from other projects, and I also tend to just collect anything that could be used for something in the future, so ribbons from around cakes, from around gifts, all sorts of things. I just keep them and stuff them in a bag. I wasn't quite sure how best to attach these to the hoop. I was thinking about doing the lark's head knots again, but I was thinking that to double up the ribbon would then make it really bulky and probably quite difficult to put back onto the other hoop. So I opted for using my glue gun again, and I just put a dab of glue on the bottom part of the ring, stuck the very end of the ribbon to it, and then flipped it over the top. And once I decided that I had enough, I decided to be a little bit extra and add on a string of fairy lights. And after the lights were all wound around the edge, I just attached the outer hoop back to the inner one, made sure that the lace was pulled really tight, and then I trimmed off the excess. In hindsight, it wasn't the best thing to do to cut it right up to the edge, because if the netting ever slides out, it'll be really difficult to stretch to get back in. So I probably should have trimmed it down but left a little bit of an excess, and then did a running stitch all the way around the edge and pulled it in tight, as you would finish off a normal embroidery hoop. But never mind, it's done and it's fine. and it's all back together, and then I just used a tiny bit of wire on the back to attach the battery pack to the bottom of the hoop. Okay, here it is, finished. I do think it looks cool, but maybe not, I don't know. There's something about it that I don't love. Like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it as much as I was expecting to. And it's funny really, because like the other ones that I made, I was kind of expecting maybe not to go as well, and this was the one that I was really thinking would look awesome. And I do think it looks nice, and I do like it, but I don't know, there's something about it that's just maybe not exactly how I was thinking. I am pleased with it though, I do like it, and I think I will probably hang it up in here somewhere. So yeah, that's all 3 done. I'm really pleased with how they all turned out. I think definitely my favourite one is the Twine one with the little glass bottles for the flowers. That one really surpassed my expectations. I think it actually looks so much cooler than I was expecting it to. So I'm definitely gonna put all of these up and display them somewhere. Not sure where yet. Need to find some more wall space. But yeah, I'm really pleased with them. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gives you a bit of inspiration. And please feel free to leave a like and a comment. And consider subscribing if you want to see more arts and crafts and pujos. Thanks so much. Bye.